President Volodymyr Zelenskyy thanked the United States for trying to stop Russian strikes on Ukraine's energy system, saying the coming days will show whether those efforts work in real life. Zelenskyy said Ukraine is in a constant contact with its partners and negotiating teams, including talks with the American side to push for what he called real formats and real results. He stressed that Kyiv is ready for meetings and ready for decisions and expects the same level of action from its allies in Europe and the United States. The comments come as Ukraine continues to face attacks on its power, infrastructure and cities, raising doubts about how quickly any agreements on energy protection can be enforced on the ground.
Thank you, America, for the efforts to halt strikes on energy. We hope the United States can make this happen. There is a statement today by the President of the United States. The situation tonight and over these days, the real situation at our energy facilities and in our cities, will show how things stand.
The Kremlin says Vladimir Putin accepted a personal request from US President Donald Trump to refrain from striking Kyiv until February 1st. That's how spokesman Dmitry Peskov put it, framing the move as a gesture meant to create favorable conditions for negotiations. But one journalist asked the obvious follow-up, does this mean a pause on all attacks or only on certain targets like energy infrastructure? Peskov refused to clarify. So what's on the table is a promise with no visible terms, a yes without a definition. Trump has said a day earlier that Putin agreed to the request as Ukraine struggles through extreme cold and mounting pressure on civilians. The Kremlin's version confirms the contact but leaves the scope of the deal deliberately vague.
Indeed, President Trump made a personal request to President Putin to refrain from striking Kyiv for a week until February 1st in order to create favorable conditions for negotiations.
Russia's advance in Ukraine has slowed to a pace not seen in more than 100 years. New analysis and reporting in Western media say that in some areas, Russian forces are moving forward just a few dozen meters a day. For comparison, even during the trench warfare on World War I, many offensives covered more ground than Russia is managing now. Along parts of the front line, the picture is one of the near stagnation. Ukrainian defense minefields and constant drone surveillance have turned the battlefield into a 27-kill zone. Any movement is quickly spotted from the air, and small assault groups face strikes from drones, artillery and precision weapons within minutes. Russian commanders have been relying on repeated infantry pushes, often described by analysts as meat grinder tactics, trying to wear down Ukrainian positions through sheer numbers rather than maneuver. But that approach has come at a high cost, with heavy losses and limited territorial gains. Military experts say this slowdown points to deeper problems: strained logistics, shortages of trained personnel, and growing dependence on drones and improvised equipment. The front, they argue, is no longer shaped by sweeping offensives, but by slow, grinding pressure, where every meter is contested, and where technology in the air now matters as much as soldiers on the ground. Berlin plans its own satellite missile detection system to reduce reliance on the United States. Germany is preparing to become the first European country to build its own space-based system to detect missile launches, according to the Financial Times. The head of German Space Command, Major General Michael Trott, said Berlin is working on the core of a satellite-based missile detection system. While the project will be national, he stressed it will be open to cooperation with the other European partners. At the moment, Europe largely depends on US early warning systems through NATO to spot long-range missile threats. But concerns over Washington's unpredictable policies have pushed European leaders to invest more in their own security capabilities. Last year, Germany announced plans to invest around 35 billion euros in military space technology by 2030, placing it among the world's top spenders in this field. Trott called missile detection an urgent priority, saying Europe needs not only to spot threats early, but also to be able to respond at the earliest stage of a missile's flight. The move comes amid growing concern over Russia's new Oreshnik ballistic missile, which has already been used in Ukraine and is considered extremely difficult to intercept. The European Space Agency confirmed it is in talks with Germany about how the future system could be linked to a broader European security infrastructure. German military leaders say there is no time to wait. The country's defense command has ordered the armed forces to be ready for a possible war scenario by 2029 and in space even sooner. American microscopics are still being found inside Russian weapons, even with the sanctions, bans, and claims that Moscow is fully cut off from Western technology. That's what Ukrainian investigators at the Kyiv Independent uncovered after shooting down a new Russian drone, the Geran 5, earlier this year. It looks less like a Shahed and more like a small cruise missile, and it can fly at speeds of up to 600 kilometers per hour. Inside, they found components made by US and European companies, including Texas Instruments, CTS Corporation, and Germany's Infineon. Some of the parts were manufactured as recently as 2024 and 2025, which means they didn't come from old stockpiles. The investigation shows how these parts still reach Russia. Most are routed through traders in China and Hong Kong. On paper, it's just an electronic trade. In reality, those ships end up in drones and missiles used to strike Ukrainian cities. Ukraine's sanctions commissioner says Russia imported more than 2 million electronic components last year alone. The scale of its drone and missile production depends directly on how many of these parts it can get from abroad. Western companies say they don't sell to Russia anymore, but what's being found on the battlefield keeps telling a different story. China has reacted to allegations that it is helping Russia build advanced missiles, including the hypersonic Oreshnik, but has denied the claims even as multiple investigations suggest otherwise. An investigation by The Telegraph reports that China has supplied Russia with specialized machine tools, equipment, and high-tech components used to manufacture weapons such as the Oreshnik ballistic missile. Ukrainian intelligence says Chinese-made computer-controlled machinery was identified at the Votkinsk plant, one of the Russia's key missile factories where systems like Oreshnik and Iskander are produced. Analysts say this equipment is part of billions of dollars worth of Chinese technology sent to Russia to help expand its military production capacity. The Oreshnik missile, which can fly at very high speed and carry multiple warheads, has already been used in strikes over Ukraine. Russian officials present it as hard to intercept, while Ukrainian and Western experts warn it increases the threat to European security. China's foreign minister responded by saying Beijing does not fuel the war and calls for political solutions, rejecting accusations that it supports Russia's military effort. But Western analysts point out that China has not joined sanctions and continues to export so-called dual-use goods, including machine tools, microchips, and electronic parts that can be used in missiles, drones, and other weapons systems. Ukraine and its partners say this flow of technology helps Moscow keep its war industry running despite international restrictions. The United States is moving air refueling tankers and electronic warfare aircraft to the Middle East as tensions around Iran continue to rise. Flights tracking data shows U.S. military planes crossing the Atlantic from the East Coast towards Europe and the Persian Gulf. The deployment includes Pegasus tankers, which observers say are escorting at least 6 Growler aircraft. These jets are designed to jam enemy air defense and radar system and are typically used ahead of or during strike operations. After a stop in Spain, the group is expected to continue towards Qatar, one of the main U.S. military hubs in the Gulf region. Washington has not made any official statements so far, but the type of aircraft and the speed of the deployment have sparked speculation about possible preparations for action against Iran. Earlier, President Trump said an additional group of U.S. warships was also heading to the region, while stressing that the United States still hopes for a diplomatic diplomatic solution. Donald Trump has issued a new ultimatum to Canada, threatening tough trade measures over aircraft certification. The US president says Ottawa has refused to approve American-made Gulfstream jets, effectively shutting them out of the Canadian market. In response, Washington has warned it could cancel certification for Canadian planes, including Bombardier models, and impose a 50% tariff on all Canadian aircraft sold in the United States if the situation is not resolved. Trump called Canada's actions unfair and said the move targets American companies. This follows an earlier warning that the US could introduce even higher tariffs if Canada deepens its trade ties with China. Switzerland, one of Europe's richest and most famous neutral countries, is getting ready to raise taxes in the name of security. The government in Bern say it wants to significantly strengthen the army and civil defense services as the situation in Europe becomes more tense. To do that, the country says it needs nearly 31 billion Swiss francs in extra funding. The plan is to raise the value-added tax. From 2028, the tax would go up by about 0.8% and stay at the level for the next 10 years. All of the money would go into a special defense fund used to buy new equipment and modernize the Swiss military. Officials are openly saying that current defense spending is no longer enough to guarantee the country's safety in the future European security landscape. Under Swiss rules, this decision doesn't just go through parliament, it also has to be approved by the public. A nationwide referendum is planned for the summer of 2027. For decades, Switzerland has been associated with calm banks and neutrality, but even here, leaders are now admitting that security is starting to matter more than comfort. That's all for now. For more content, please subscribe.